Guys, welcome to what I believe to be our last meeting together on this topic. I hope we have other meetings together on other topics as time goes on. We are pleased to have Penny with us today, representing the department. I'm going to let her introduce herself to you if you have not had the chance to meet her previously. Unfortunately, Jamie is down with COVID and is unable to be with us for our last meeting. I did speak with her earlier today, and she's got a pretty good case of it, so she's struggling a bit right now. While I want Penny, let's go ahead. Let me let you introduce yourself, okay?
Thank you. I'm Penny Thurmond. I'm the West Grand Region Corps Director. I support all of the superintendents in the Northwest and Southwest region. I've been with the department since 2013, and I can say that this subcommittee funding venture facilitator has been a great learning experience for me. While I'm so sorry Jamie's sick, I'm happy to get to join your subcommittee as well and to put some names with the faces.
Thank you. And Penny will be helping to guide us through this discussion today, but as it's been shared with us, is that this is about the opportunity for that last policy discussion and our advisement, anything that we would like to share related to policy that will be going back to the steering committee. And so we will quickly move through some slides here. Penny, I don't know if there are any ones that we need to hit. Of course, we'll stop at the statement because I'm thinking right now we may be able to sing this to the tune of Amazing Grace, and I thought that would be a fun thing to do today. But actually, I know that we all are very familiar with this, so we will move on past our statement at this point. So really, our discussion is around policy, and Penny is going to share with us the particular policy issues that we have been asked to consider. We are not going to move through these one by one. This is going to be a matter of us taking a moment on each page to see if there are issues that need to be addressed by the group or conversation that you want to add to this discussion. Last week, as you know, we spent a fair amount of time talking about economically disadvantaged, our concerns around that. We talked about a shift to free and reduced lunch. I can tell you that since that discussion, in conversation with some of our superintendents, I have heard concern about the fact that, as we know, many schools have completely been able to shift to free lunch for everyone. And so because of that, they have had issues with parents' willingness to fill out the forms that actually give family income. And so if we were funding economically disadvantaged in this way, their concern is that they really don't, in those situations, they don't have a leverage to hold over that family because they're already getting the free lunch, whether they fill the form out or not. So that is one consideration that I bring to the group that was part of that discussion. But other than that, any other comments around these three policy items that you see right now, including the concentration of poverty and sparsity, that you would like to include?
I just had a question on the sparsity. When it talks about range from 10 to 25 students, does that mean federal, when it says federal is 10, less than 10 students in a square mile? So would they be looking for a recommendation of 10 to 25? So if it's less than 25 students in a square mile, are they looking for a recommendation there, or just thoughts?
Then I think that it would be very appropriate if we wanted to set a number and say that that is the number that we think is appropriate. Am I hearing 25 from you or another number?
I think my thought is, and help me if I'm wrong here, if it's less than 25 students in a given square mile, that would capture more students than we said if we said less than 10. Am I thinking correctly on that?
Someone else speak to that. I'm kind of thinking, I'm reversing that in my head, but I'm not sure if I'm doing that incorrectly.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because I was flip-flopping back and forth, and I'm trying to make sure I understand.
I was reversing it in my head too, so yeah.
So I think that you're taking less opportunity away with the 25.
Would the 25 result in capturing more districts than the less than 10?
I think that answer is yes, Ben. I think that's correct, because if sparsity is defined as the federal level is 10 in a square mile, if we're increasing that to 25 in a square mile, it would increase the total number of students if it's below 25.
After that's okay. Thank you for the confirmation that I am thinking about that the right way.
So do we want to specify a number? And Ben, would you want to bring a recommendation that we would?
Yeah, I'll do that. If increasing the number captures more students and more districts with this issue, because I don't want to always setting a number arbitrarily. So what happens if it's 10 but that district has 11? You're without some type of sliding scale there. I would want to capture as many as possible.
What happens if there's less than 10? Like, what if there's 5 kids per square mile? Do we not support them from a definition of sparsity because there's less than 10? Or is the range should be 25 and below? I realize that's kind of technical, but I mean, what happens if there's like 1 to 9 students in a square mile? Do we just disregard those?
My thought is 25 and below. So in that situation, you cover those 9, or in a situation where you have 25 students in that, you capture those 25. And that would be my recommendation. If there's not a sliding scale, then we need to capture as many as possible.
So I'm hearing a below 25. Anyone who would want to address that at all, or are you comfortable with the below 25? Okay, can I see a thumbs up? That's good with everybody? Okay, all right. So Penny, if you would record that for us, that their recommendation would be 25 or below. Anything else? Just take a quick moment on economically disadvantaged, poverty, anything else that you would like to include before we go to the next page?
Nancy, yes, this is Dale. I certainly would like to hear a little bit more about what you learned from the superintendents in Northeast. And before you even share that, I would like, and I have asked for some type of historical context from the department about when we shifted and what the outcomes of us shifting from the state level of looking at free reduced versus where we are now with direct serve. And my understanding, now Penny, please know that my context here is limited to my knowledge as a superintendent at the time, which was, and and I can say this, Nancy, because of where I've been. Sometimes superintendents don't have all the information, and so. But I know at the time when we were transitioned as a state from direct cert to free and reduced, the way that I remember it, it was told to us that the federal definition had changed and a state could elect to go direct cert. And we as a state chose to do that. At the time, my understanding was that the impact was actually, we received more funding at the school district, but the percentages actually went way down. For instance, in Hamlin County, when I left, we were like, I would say 79% free and reduced lunch, but when we moved to direct cert, we actually moved to like about 50 or 55%. So the question is, why did we move? What has that done to us as a state, and what did that do to school districts? So Nancy, tell me what your superintendents think. Wait, one other thing before you say that is our cafeteria staff, our school nutrition staff loved it because they didn't have to collect all this information to be able to prove eligibility for students. Our personnel loved it who were having to do the work, but our other folks didn't say that was necessarily good. So now, Nancy, tell me or tell us what you heard from the group there in Northeast, if you would.
Well, they are supportive of using free and reduced as the measure. But their concern is that we would have to have a handle on how, and figuring out, the school districts are going to have a handle on figuring out how to really get the financial information from families. Because they believe that right now, it would be very, very difficult to get families to be able to provide their financial information because they're going to receive free and reduced lunch anyway. So the one carrot in front of them is already there. No pun intended to the carrot.
So Nancy or Dale, do we not even collect free and reduced lunch status anymore? Do we not even have that data anymore? And we only collect direct cert?
They attempt to get those data, but they're having trouble getting families returning them because, yeah.
Okay.
Families used to be readily willing to return the data because it meant that they were going to get the free or reduced. But that being said, Dale, they believe that is the correct way to measure it because it is the more definitive answer to the question.
And that is shifting to free and reduced, just like it's in red.
That is correct. And we know from the standpoint of federal grants, we know that we have that has caused us difficulty with federal grants because of the fact that we're using direct cert. So I think it's the right way to go. I just think that we have to be mindful to the fact that the collection of the data, because districts may see a penalty if they can't get those data in. Anything else on that, or do we want to move to the next page? Let's go ahead, realizing that we can come back if somebody has a thought that they want to discuss. We're going to just give you a moment to look through these, the ones you can see on the screen at this time, and take a moment with them and see if there are any of these that you want to be sure that you have made a point.
Hey, one question, Nancy, on tutoring. Is that provided in person or is that provided virtually?
It's a good question. It's certainly not defined.
One of the criticisms that we've heard leveled is obviously you're making schools, that's the big debate right now, and working on it go 180 days. Then tutoring is going to be permitted to continue virtual, and they think there's an inherent unfairness with that. So I think it needs to align with whatever you come up with. And I know Representative Faison introduced a bill to just allow for 10 days of virtual. So I don't know. I'm open to anything. I don't have an answer.
Anyone else with any guidance on that? Anything that you have heard specifically, or anything that you think that we need to actually make a statement about here?
I guess my question is, it's only focused on those that score below for what? For anything? For math and reading, or for ELA and math, I guess? Is there anything like?
If I remember the legislation correctly, it was students scoring below an ELA. And one of the exceptions for promotion to fourth grade was not only did they attend summer school, but they also received a tutor throughout the entire fourth grade year. But I think it was focused solely on ELA, but I'd have to go back and look at the legislation just to be 100%.
If it was tied to last year's legislation, I think you are accurate on that. I think we're leaving out, what about the kids that need math remediation? So are we is only reading and writing important to this funding formula, or do we think math is important too? I know we don't have the policies put in place as we did last year with the special session, but it just strikes me that that's a miss. And why just third grade? What about eighth grade? What about middle school?
Well, third grade is because that's the benchmark on where we're going. If you cannot read on grade level by third grade, it pretty much means you'll never read on grade level. So
Yeah,
that's
I
why
understand
I kind of sit that out.
But there's also, the other kind of marker I've heard is eighth grade math. But across this whole spectrum, why wouldn't we want to look at both third and eighth grade for ELA and math for both?
They didn't have funding for that.
Yeah. Well, if this is our opportunity to ask for funding for that,
I agree.
a few things need to change too.
I think we could add that. I heard that came from the Air Commission. I think I heard that. So I would have.
Somewhere on there. Excellent. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and I brought up the bill. It is ELA, and that's where it comes into play. So just to clarify that, I've got it in front of me. So
I'm like Tara. Put it as a wish list, Tara.
Yeah.
I'm in. Wish lists are nice.
All right. Tara, would you like to provide some wording that you'd like to see in this section? I believe you're going to have support for that.
Well, I guess it depends on if we're asking the question, then the question would be, is this required for students to score below on third grade TCAP, ELA, and math, as well as eighth grade TCAP, ELA, and math?
So, Tara, this is Deb, can I say something more, please?
Yeah, please.
The only thing that would concern me when we talk about this is required is that we're getting into a place, if we have more students who obviously are below in math, we obviously want to provide support for them. But if we are requiring this, are we going to have enough teachers to support all of this too? So, I think looking at making recommendations of providing some type of support for students who score below in math is outstanding. But requiring it, to me, is not anything I would feel comfortable with.
I think it's also, but this is my perspective, is that I think tutoring is a stopgap for a short term. It's not a long-term solution. Ultimately, we need the in-school experience to surpass the need for tutoring in general. So I don't know how that gets worked into this, but this, if we think about this from a funding formula standpoint, what we're recommending is that tutoring is a long-term solution to technically what should be a short-term fix to get over the remediation challenges that exist right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just a perspective. So I agree. The requirement that is a hard word to put in there, especially if it's not going to be a long-term solution.
Yeah, and Ben, is this a place that we could think together on? I know we're doing a lot of work on third grade retention and not just looking at one shot in time at a TCAP test, because teachers know they work with kids 180 days and they know far better than just a 1 day of a TCAP test. Here's something we might want to put in here. I'm asking you, Ben, if it's something along the lines of also looking at universal screeners and benchmarks and so forth, progress.
Well, and that's one thing we're separate from this, but we are looking at that and talking about that is the use of the universal screener. If you go back and look at the rest of the bill, that's required now in those grades. So you're going to have state approved universal screeners. So not just talking about ELA, but if just the math example, there's going to be screeners in place that are going to be able to tell us that information. So even though this legislation is centered on the TCAP, there's nothing preventing something in the future from looking at benchmarks and then requiring tutoring of benchmark. I mean, you have RTI and you have certain interventions that are already in place right now, but the tutoring is in addition to that. It's more than just your daily interventions that the student receives. So, I mean,
Other comments or reactions to this?
Are you talking about specifically for tutoring or for other pieces on the page?
Tutoring right now. I don't think we actually finished that subject. I can tell you from our experience right now with the high dosage tutoring that we're doing at the Mass-Monger Foundation, and we're doing over 1,500 kids right now across the region who are not on grade level, and looking specifically at third grade. And that's to Tara's point, one of the things that we identified very quickly on is that we have to move to mathematics also. So we're also moving our high dosage tutoring from just ELA to mathematics beginning this summer because it is a huge need of students. But we are facing a lot of hurdles with that, not the least of which is really around identifying and getting tutors trained. And we're providing a hourly wage that we're trying to exceed what they can make at fast food restaurants and all that sort of thing. But we're still having issue being able to identify the tutors. So it is a large issue to do this. But the final point I would make is we really don't think, while TCAP is one measure, it is just one measure. And we're really finding that our success is with formative assessment and really working with a very different system of individualizing that tutoring to the learner. So TCAP is just one small measure that we use.
Ben, can we, or Nancy, excuse me, Ben and I, and Dale as well, we use the word may a lot. I like a lot of where this discussion has gone. Could we possibly put, I mean, since this is a wish list anyway, can we put that it may include the 8th grade math and as well? And again, we prefer, and I would request that you put, we prefer in-person tutoring. It really does need to mirror with whatever they come up with on the, I mean, it's not going to always be possible in rural areas and even in some urban areas to do it in person. I understand that, but we need some consistency across the board on all that. Do you do your tutoring in person, Nancy?
We do. It is all done in person.
So you're the expert at this. So it's, I mean, can we kind of mirror it? Because we want the legislators to really buy into it and give them some. I mean, why not put it the way we think it should be?
Right.
So JC, I got to push back on that a little bit because there's going to be plenty of kids that are not able to get to an in-person tutor. So is there a way for us to propose both as options so it gives districts the most flexibility?
Yeah. I said, I suggested it should include in-person tutoring
So
and make it,
then-
we play with words in the legislature, as Ben and Dale know. We use the word may versus shall. And may means it's optional, whereas shall means it must happen.
very well.
So-
So how would you word this to be clear enough to say it may or shall
Well, I would
include
use,
virtual and in-person tutoring options?
it is preferable that this tutoring occur in person and leave it at that.
So
You
I
don't
don't
have-
necessarily, I guess I don't,
But may include virtual options.
very well then. I would agree with you on that.
Okay.
I wanted to kind of get some feedback on the first two items with teacher salaries. The first question, existing educator salaries, I know that's been a big issue. My only concern or question that comes up, what about hiring new teachers? So as right now, the way it works, it's all in one pot. So even if they put new money in, that's the same pot of money you use for new teachers, current teachers, you name it. I mean, JC, and if Beth's still on here, kind of your thoughts about what about the new educators that have to be hired? If the investing new dollars, if new dollars are only going to current teachers, then there also needs to be some type of money there set aside for new teachers to be hired.
Absolutely.
I'll put it together. I don't know. That was my one concern, especially when there's other talk about it in K through 2, lowering student teacher ratios. You look at a lot of the comments in the lower grades, lowering ratios. Well, that's going to require new individuals to be hired as this is phased in.
It's a dual-edged sword. You have to do both recruitment and retention. It's simultaneous. And in doing so, you need to make sure that you're doing both. When I push for recruitment and I talk about some of the things, Ben, you're talking about, I get slammed. I mean, I get a lot of criticism. The Grow Your Own program, it's one vehicle. It's not the only vehicle. And so they've been very critical, a lot of current teachers, because they feel like the current teachers are being neglected in the process. So it's got to be a dual-edged sword in it. We've got to approach it from both angles. And so part of like teacher salary needs to be based on a couple different factors. So not only are you looking at degrees, which I think are valuable. I know people have moved away from that, but you do have to include degrees. You need to incentivize it in some way to get people to move forward on other items, years of experience to keep them in the classroom. And then one of the things Ben and I are working on as a group, Nancy, we're looking at a program that we did in Florida called the DROP program. Louisiana also has adopted it, which would also allow people who are staying in those last 5 years, those productive teachers, to remain in the classroom, and hopefully we can stretch out the tenure another 5 years. We want the good teachers to stay in the classroom, which is we have a great number of very excellent teachers in our state, and right now they feel like they're not getting appreciated, and so we do need to work on the retention piece of that. So absolutely, Ben. So we're open to anything that we can move that forward in this.
And it says teachers, but we mean educators, right? So it's teachers and principals compensated enough to draw and retain the best talent in the region.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interchangeable. And by the way, I'd say paraprofessionals and all system employees. I don't want to exclude anybody.
Yeah.
And since we have Representative Marsh on here, I want to thank him for joining us. And he knows how important it is to keep local flexibility. Every school system community has a different set of challenges when it comes to recruitment and hiring of their teachers. And so
different amounts of money to pay. So the money's different too.
And along with flexibility, has got to be additional funding, but locals need to be able to determine if there's shortages in K through 2 or if there's shortages you know, in higher ed and math or whatever it might be. But the locals have to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm worried about with the way the question is structured, about saying, you know, where the money has to go in certain situations because of that specific instance right there. I mean, every local district is different as far as local funding goes and what locals can do and what they need, you know, based on the programs that they have. So I don't know if we want to recommend anything there, but that was a thought I had on that, just based on feedback that I've received from districts on that.
I'd like to share, Beth she's tried to speak a couple of times. She's thinking her mic doesn't work, but she said she agrees with JC. This has to be both, to be a both and proposition. We must be able to recruit and retain educators.
In these conversations, are we addressing local input or funding into education? And also, are we addressing any of the way we have pensions set up or no? So I bring that up to think about retention of great leaders and educators. The pension is set up so that if you reach a certain level, you got to be in a certain level, and then you have that level of pension the rest of your life. Is that the best way for us to set that up? And is that part of this funding stream? That's one question. On the other side is what is the local contribution into this conversation? And I don't remember us having those conversations. I think this is just state money.
So Tara, this is Dale. I remember us having that conversation, and I remember us asking for the department to go back and educate us and fill in the gaps of what we think we know and what actually is, because the current pension system for educators has changed, and it changed because you've got 2 paths of retirement now for educators that are very different. Most of us know the type of system that if you work 30 years, then you draw retirement based on what you put in, that kind of thing. That changed over, I guess, probably several years ago now, where much more like I would say the business world is where those educators now are responsible for building their own retirement system with a little bit of help from the state. I know enough about it to be dangerous. That's why we asked the department to come back to us and give us that type of information, but we haven't heard yet. The other question you asked was something what was it, your part 2, because I didn't want to speak to that too.
About local funding of.
And that's the second thing we asked from day one. What is this going to do to the local impact or local funding or physical capacity? And that we asked for that as well too. Those are critical.
So we just haven't received. I mean, at this point, this is our last meeting, right? So we should have received this by now.
And I went back this morning and looked at Jamie's correspondence, and actually this this document that she placed in the in your Google folder had some of these questions on there. So she submitted those to TDOE, and she's just waiting as well. And I also wanted to say that Beth commented in the chat. She's also hearing negative feedback on the Grow Your Own from experienced folks because they feel overlooked by the state.
That's right.
Meaning the teachers are feeling overlooked? Who's feeling overlooked?
Teachers, Tara, to help you get in their mindset, they've paid their dues, they've gone through college, they've forked over their money, they've waited tables, they've taught, they've done everything they can to get to the teaching field. And then we come up with a program behind the thing that's going to pay for their education to go through. We need to do that. I'm not opposed to that. But the problem becomes is that these other teachers that are currently there going, wait a minute, you did nothing for me. And they're really feeling, and they're carrying debt. That's why one of the reasons you see a lack of diversity in teaching. You're trying to get these people to come in to teach that are either moms, minority, ex-military, bringing them in, and they're going, I'm not going to go through colleges of ed to do this. Anyway, long story short, it's a complex issue that we need to continue to evolve, but teachers feel unappreciated. And particularly some of our younger teachers say 0 for 10. And like Dale pointed out, was part of it was due to the retirement. It's a changing system. It's no longer, I can do 30 and retire. You better hope the market's doing well. And so there's kind of an omnious thing, and that's part of the reason we're seeing some of the shortages that we're doing. New York, while we were talking, New York Times popped up, lack of subs nationally. It's just a field that people are not as eager to go into anymore. I think we need to change our narrative, and I've said this to the Department of Education. We don't need Representative Marsh, although it'd be welcome, but we don't need state reps to applaud teachers. We don't need to do it. We need the governor to come out and I hope he'll do it in the state of the state and tell teachers truly how much he appreciated the work that they've done, not only through COVID, but everything else and every day. And he knows what they've done. And it really, we've not set the table from the very top. Teachers feel unappreciated. So back to that, and dollars will go so far. Work days go longer, the workload gets heavier, and that's where they're frustrated. And now they're carrying a ton of student debt. So that's where these, I'd say 0 to 10, 0 to 15 teachers are really feeling a lot of frustration with the system. I'm just being honest with you.
So I'm going to probe a little bit. I just want to make sure I understand. It sounds like what I'm hearing you say, JC, is that existing teachers that have gone through the traditional pathway are somewhat biased, might be the wrong word, but kind of like don't appreciate the fact that more people want to come into the system. They're going through the Grow Your Own program. Like and that you're saying that's because of the debt they've incurred.
I think that's part of it. I think that's a simple explanation. There's much more to it, but in a nutshell, when you move, they feel neglected in some way. So like one of the things that we could do to come along with that, Tara, is that you could do student redebt payments. So for example, it would be a great initiative to say, look, if you've got student debt, which you hear all the time on the bigger issue at the federal level, the students want to, if you're a teacher, for every year that you teach, that we would repay amount of money for that, for your student debt. And we could, if you teach for 10 years, or 5 years, or whatever the number is, 3 years, we'll absolve your student debt that you had incurred to a certain level. You could set thresholds on it. That would be another way to look at it. But if I'm going to have to come into teaching and I have to borrow $20,000 and I'm going to make $37,000 a year as a starting teacher, I'm going to start looking for another job.
Yeah, it's an interesting retention strategy.
So if you could do some way to pay student debt back or to help them address that with it, loan forgiveness, all sorts of issues that we could come along with to couple with it. We really need to get down to the nuts and bolts. I mean, we take this stuff serious. I'm a comedian. I like to do a lot of funny stuff. But when it gets to this stuff, I get dead level serious. And our teachers really feel neglected. And I'm sorry to take in so long on this conversation, but I love working with you guys. You guys are really trying to ask the right questions. So I appreciate that.
JC, as far as I know, the federal government has a teacher loan forgiveness program. So if you work for 5 years in a low income school, no matter when you started, your debt can be forgiven. I know that because I've had that happen.
And how easily accessible is that? How do they explain it?
It's a federal program. It's a federal program. So I had to find it on my own, but I just want to acknowledge that is out there, and it's something that should be more utilized.
And so we need to figure out how to tap into it. Yes, ma'am.
Beth also added in the chat and showed the support with more than words. And I'm assuming that was when you all were talking about something the governor could do.
She's right.
That's when it showed up.
I absolutely agree with every word that I've heard all of you say in support of teachers. I'm just struggling in my mind as to how we can make our statement known and our feelings known in this regard. I'm hearing that there needs to be alternative means of supporting teachers besides just salary itself. I'm hearing the need to ensure that teachers understand the level of respect we have for their dedication to the field of teaching. But I'm really struggling with how we can get our point across.
So is our point, are we still, Nancy, looking at policy teacher salary?
Yes, I believe, yes.
Okay. And haven't we consistently said that we want to be have the highest teacher salary in the Southeast? We want to be at the top. Haven't we said that on this group, or is that other meetings? I mean, would that not be something that we would want to say as a, I certainly would make that recommendation.
I second it.
And I would support that. That's excellent, Dale. The goal of having the highest teacher salaries in the Southeast.
Let's be greedy. Let's be in the nation.
Can I encourage you all to think about that a little bit differently? I mean, don't get me wrong, I think that we underpay our educators, not just teachers. But I'm thinking about this at a Tennessee level. What if Tennessee was the #1 state in the union for teachers to want to come work and live? Because it's salaries is one thing, but what else can we be doing at a community level to support teachers in a way that makes them feel more included? To JC's point earlier about not feeling, and also Beth's point about not feeling welcomed is not the right word, but you get what I'm saying.
Tara, one of the things that we're working on at the federal level is a thing called the Helper Act. And it's almost like the VA loan to allow teachers. I mean, if you're a teacher in Metro Nashville Public Schools, where do you live?
Not in Metro Nashville.
You can't afford to live here anymore. And so your new teachers are coming here, and it's a difficult opportunity. So one of the things that we've looked at is a program at the federal level, a lot like the VA, where they could come in and help them get a living, like a low interest loan to buy a house. There are multiple things to do, but it goes back to also, Tara, the workload. And I think Beth wanted to allude to that. She would tell you it's the same thing. The support is that if you're working 60 or 70 hours a week, and that's what I tell people, you can pay them $100,000 a year, but if I'm having to work 70 or 80, at some point I got to say, hey, my family is a little bit more than the money. So it's got to be a balance. And somehow we structure that, but we really need to have that. And that's why it's got to be an open discussion and blatantly talking about it at the highest levels of government. And I think that it's at the state level. And that's why, I mean, I advocated for the governor to step out and do it. You guys have the ability to get to him.
There, this is Dale again. I agree with your recommendation, but I'm going to stick to my recommendation first. And we can add yours if you want to, but I still want to go on record saying that's what we want is #1, and the others will come too.
I'm starting to see some thumbs up. Can we agree that we would like to add that language?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it.
I want to make sure, I want to clarify, I have that the subcommittee recommends that Tennessee has the highest teacher salaries in the, it was originally Southeast and then the nation now. Is there something else?
As much as I like JC, I'm not going to go for that one. I'm going to stick with the Southeast. I think that's who we compete with.
I take what I can get, Dale.
For JC, you get an A+ for enthusiasm on that one. I'm with you.
Jamie has also put in the chat the link for the teacher loan forgiveness program.
Thank you, Jamie.
And I'll let you know, JC, some of your folks, probably your HR directors, that is the place to probably hit that, because I know HR departments share that with new employees in their new employee training.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like it's a great program that's very underutilized and shouldn't be because it's federal money.
Hey, this is Pat Marsh, and I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing. I don't know a lot about education. I've learned a lot, and I want to just say that what you all are talking about is basically the same thing we're talking about in the trucking business, which I'm in the trucking business, and we need drivers. We're pulling our hair out, trying to figure out what we can do to pay them more, to show them that we appreciate them, and the older guys are retiring, and there's not many young guys wanting to come in because it's a tough job. It's long hours. They're away from home, and I'm hearing the same thing what you all are talking about. I think it's all across America. I think a lot of people don't want to work now, and the good ones, the older ones, they're getting out, and the young ones like, I'm not going to do this. It's a shame. It's terrible, and I don't know what the answer is, and I don't think it's not in our industry. It's not just throwing money at them. We throw money at them, and they'll come in and work another month and still quit. So it's a terrible situation, and you all have got some good ideas, and I think some of them will work. And as a state representative, what I'm listening to is these are all great ideas, but how are we going to afford to do this? It all comes down to money, and there's only a certain amount of money, and we just got to figure out the best way to get the best bang for the dollar. So y'all are doing a good job. I don't know if that helps or not, but.
Very much appreciate your comments. Since I work for a guy who has run a few logistics companies, I can absolutely understand where you're coming from on that.
You sure know. We've got 600 trucks in our fleet. We've got 125 with no drivers today, and begging and paying a lot more money and kissing their tails, and I mean everything. We're doing everything we can think of and get brand new trucks and all the benefits you can think of, and still can't get them.
Well, and maybe Representative Marsh, you kind of piqued the topic too. Maybe it's looking at not just salary money, but it's looking at what are the things we have in education right now that we're doing that we don't need to do or are not beneficial at all. Is there anything out there that we can say, you know what, this isn't education's role. We're just requiring it because somebody thought it was a good idea at the time, and narrowing the focus down a little bit. I mean, that's kind of something separate from this right here, this topic, but trying to think outside the box of what are we requiring our teachers to do right now that's not beneficial, that we're requiring them to do just because somebody thought it was a good idea at the time. So that's kind of where I'm going with that, and it's a separate conversation. But
and what are we doing now? Say 50, 60, 70 years ago in teaching. Was it just as hard? Was it harder? We didn't hear them complain because we didn't have internet. We didn't have telephone. I think it's always been terrible. It's always been a terribly tough profession and underappreciated. And it's just we're hearing the complaints. We're hearing the stuff a lot more now.
All right, so Representative Marsh, I got to speak to that one. You know me. I'm gonna see you tomorrow morning and talk to you as well.
I know.
It absolutely was hard back in the day. But back in the day when I went to school, I will tell you that we had kids that dropped out. We didn't have compulsory attendance. They could drop out like 14, 15 years old, and that's what they did. Now we're keeping kids till they're 18 because of the compulsory attendance law. Also, I had a next door neighbor that was special needs, and she never, ever went to a public education classroom. So we are doing so many good things now that we did not have to do, that we should be doing right now, that we should have done years ago, because we're taking care of public education, taking care of all kids now, where years ago that didn't happen. Those kids were institutionalized, and now they're in public education classrooms, and it is so much different now, and our community challenges are so much different now. And so it's just taking all of us to try to figure out the needs of these kids. So it is much more difficult today to be a teacher than it was 15, 20, or 30 years ago.
And you got to teach people that can't even speak English.
Right. Yes.
And back then, most everybody had a daddy and a mama. Now they don't. It's terrible.
That's right.
You know, I'd wondered with COVID if it would give us the opportunity to reimagine some of what we expect from teachers, in that we may have a very seasoned teacher and a new teacher, and they're expected to do most of the same things. And has COVID allowed us to really change things up? And what have we learned from that would keep teachers in the profession longer because they were a different growth paths, and also attract some new talent? I don't know how you tie that into a funding formula, but I think that work needs to be done. We need to, teaching today should not look like it did years ago.
I think that's a great point, and I want to put something on the radar for all of us here. Is I have just, in my own personal neighborhood, have seen kids that have been born during COVID that are having very, very difficult issues with regards to they're having developmental delays, and they've just been born within the last 12 months. I will tell you, in 4 or 5 years, we need to be getting ready. We don't know what children are going to be coming to the classroom like 4 or 5 years who have experienced COVID in the womb or who've had it themselves. So I would just share, we just don't know. And we've got to build a funding formula today that's going to take care of kids today and tomorrow.
Dale, I think you bring up a really good point. I would say I see the same thing in my neighborhood, and actually across friends across the nation too. The kids are not in a socialized environment the way we need them to be, and their parents are not either. And it's a very, very different setup. This brings to the point of the K2 wait, or even before kindergarten. What are we going to do to be able to ensure that students are ready to walk into that kindergarten class? Because, but many of them are currently not ready. And in 4 or 5 years, when those kids that have been born over the past couple of years are beginning to walk into kindergarten, where are we going to be when they hit 3rd grade? Because we can't tutor our way out of this. Like we've either you need to help support that birth to age 5 in advance of walking into kindergarten, while simultaneously addressing the kindergarten on up to ensure that we've got high quality classrooms for all those kids. Because you're right, there's going to be more challenges, I think, than we are aware of. And I'm sure some really smart researcher out there has already started to create some sort of amazing research that's going to help us understand it. But we can't wait 10 years to figure out what the research is going to tell us. We need to think about this now. I think you bring up a really good point, Dale. Thank you.
Well, and Tara, going back to your point, I feel like more money invested on the front end will pay off in the long run than waiting until the high school years, middle grade years, or even when the person's an adult. It just seems logical to invest in a way that, whether it's lower teacher ratios, whether it's having a dedicated assistant in the classroom with the teacher, and those may not be the end all do all, but ways for districts and flexibility to invest in those lower grades to address a lot of those issues, because it's not going to be just learning phonics and, learning how. There's going to be a lot of other things that are going to come along before that can even be addressed with those students.
Well, I think along those lines, as you're thinking about that, it's not too, there's the academics that teachers are learning when they go, whether they go do the grow their own or going into post-secondary, but there's also now a need for our post-secondary institutions to evolve to support a lot of these challenges that are going to be coming about. So that the teachers that we're hiring are in a position to be able to help those students. You bring up a good point about the investment, and I'm trying to think if it was Brookings or someone else did a analysis years ago, but for every dollar put into early childhood education, we get $7 in return on the back end, meaning after they've finished high school and college, because we're not investing, we're not spending money on sending students directly into prison, or they're dropping out of school, and the social services that are required to help support them. There's plenty of research to back up why investing in the early years is so important.
I would agree. We need to really emphasize and put additional weights on that. It says K through 2, like Tara said, but even earlier. So ever what we would do as a committee, I would recommend that, especially because of COVID, right?
I would honestly, if a district's going to have a pre-K, then include the pre-K, and I'd almost go up to grade 3. I know a lot of people are 2, but that 3rd grade is such a pivotal year. And if you can build a system, if you will, using that word, where from it's pre-K or kindergarten, they have that continuity up to 3rd grade, then they're going to be successful 3rd grade, and that's going to solidify your bedrock for everything on forward. My concern would be cutting it out at 2nd grade when that 3rd grade is so pivotal. I mean, that's my thought.
It's a good point, Ben.
I think we may be out of time, Madam Chair. I don't know. I know we're getting close.
We're getting.
But these discussions have been so good, and I know they're having them at the legislature and everything else. But I think, and I told people when they asked me about the process, I said we should have begun this a long time ago. And we don't have enough time. And I don't think 11th hour BP bill or successful funding formula is going to come out and deliver what we really need. And, you know, some elements of this can move forward, but I don't think all of it is ready to be moved forward. And I mean, that's just being honest with you. And I'd love to continue our discussions. And because we need a system and processes in place that work for everything. And to build on what Tara said, it's called seamless articulation, Tara. And that's what we did in Florida. You start from here and you, with the end goal, they're either productive in their career or they're going to college or university leading to career, but it's all one step builds to the next, which goes to the next. It's all interlinked. And that's what we've got to do. And rushing it through to say we've done this. I know the governor don't want to hear it, but I wish they would have waited until we've done our work and really have taken some of our recommendations. But I just don't see that this is ready. I mean, we're still debating other pieces of it.
Hey, JC, what
Yes,
I
sir.
heard this morning from some of our leadership folks, and I don't know who knows a lot about this, that they said that they thought what we would probably pass would be some kind of master framework that does not have all the insides in. And we would be talking about this it really wouldn't go into effect until 24 or 25. We would put the main framework in and then do what you say, keep talking about it till we get it where we think it's right. And so I don't think it's going to be just this is what it is and we're going to start immediately, from what I understand.
Right.
But I'm not in on all that education stuff up here.
Even delaying it, I mean, we still want to make sure that we can adjust it. I mean, I know the governor's going to have some wins, and he should, and we should work on that. And but there's just elements of this that I don't think we're ready to move forward on.
I asked him early on, I said, Governor, do you think we can really get this done this year? He looked at me and said, why not? We've been talking about it forever. Said, we need to go on and get it done. But I don't know that we got to start it immediately. I think we need to get the framework done, and then all you professionals talk about how to fix it on the inside.
Thank you.
I think you're probably right. We're not going to rush in to do this just because we got to do something.
Thank you for that.
One of the things that I have learned from this process, and I've learned many things from this process, is that we have some people in our state who have worked in the field of education. A number of them are sitting right here in front of us on the screen right now, who have a wealth of experience and talent and ability to guide this work. And I've not learned a lot in this life, but part of what I have learned is you go to your experts. You go to the people who you go to the people who have had the boots on the ground, and you find out what they think is right and what they think is work, and listen to them in that regard. And I know that over over the last 20 years. I know, and Dale can affirm this, that our superintendents have regularly brought forward ideas, challenges, and incredible observations about how we can improve the way we fund education in Tennessee, where we can save, where we can redirect, where things need to be fixed, where they need to become more equitable. All of those have been done for years. And so now we find ourselves in 3 or 4 months rushing through a process. And so that is my concern. And so JC, I appreciate your comments very much. Each of you who have talked about the concern with that and are moving too fast in the process. And I can absolutely tell you that that's what I hear from the 19 directors that I work with on a regular basis. And that is, we're just moving too fast. Let's move well. And so I know that you can really go far if you go together and you take your time to get there in a respectable manner. So I hope that we now have given the guidance we can give. We've done it to the best of our ability, and now we're going to have some faith and trust. And so I'm going to believe in the people who've guided this state and the people who do guide this state, and we're going to believe in the best happening for our kids through the effort that we put forward. And I want to thank each of you for being part of my life for the last few months and allowing me the chance to get to know you better. I hope that there's a time and a place where we get to know each other face to face more, and I'm thankful for those on the screen that I do get to see on a regular basis face to face. I have been with the people that I admire greatly in the work that you do, and you've taught me a lot. So let's go in faith and in trust that that we're going to plant a seed that might make a difference. And I thank you for the work that you've done.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
You guys are amazing chairs.
Thank you all for your time.
Bye.
Bye, guys.